Let's bring in MSNBC legal analyst, former acting Solicitor General Neil Katyal. Neil, I'd love to go through with you some of the headlines on this morning. It seems even in these candidates, even in Mike Pence's tone and shift in his phraseology, if I may, that there are Republicans that are seeing very clearly the seriousness of this indictment. And then the Washington Post has come out with a piece that really is very close to Donald Trump's personality, where he thinks it's never over for him and he can push and he can win on everything, and that he rejected his lawyers' efforts to avoid a settlement with the DOJ on the classified documents. What do you make of that? Does that ring true for you in terms of following the actions of this former president?
Right. So I think there are two separate questions you're asking. One is the Republican opposition to what Donald Trump did. And the second is Trump's opposition to listening to his lawyers, as detailed in the Washington Post article. With respect to the former, I think the trajectory of criticism of Trump is really important. I mean, when the night that Mar-a-Lago happened, actually the day Mar-a-Lago happened, I was on our network basically talking about how big of a deal this was, that those of us who'd handled classified information knew that this was going to culminate in an indictment of Donald Trump. That was dismissed by many people, excused by many people, said it was, no big deal. Well, obviously the indictment showed it was a big deal. And think about all the criticism he's gotten since. I mean, Bill Barr said Trump is toast because of this, that he's going to jail. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Trump's own former chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, Trump's own second chief of staff, John Kelly, former national security advisor for Donald Trump, John Bolton. It's like Trump's entire cabinet at this point is condemning what Trump did, said he's likely to go to jail for it. So that's on that side. And then on the other side of, what the new Washington Post reporting is, I don't think we should be surprised that Donald Trump didn't listen to anyone and just said, the article says that he claimed to be the smartest person in the room and that the documents were all his and that he had no interest in turning him over, even once he was warned that they were very sensitive and classified. That is despicable behavior for anyone who's handled classified information. That material is generated with, the blood and sweat of our intelligence community, of the foreign intelligence community. It cannot be treated that cavalierly.
So Trump has a long shot to avoid jail time, and I guess that would be the presidency. The other area of interest here would be the judge, Aileen Cannon. And there's been an extensive look of late at her experience or lack thereof, let alone her ruling earlier that was just she was humiliated in terms of the reaction to an earlier ruling in this very case. And yet this is her case. Could this be helpful to the former president in terms of especially dragging it out through the election cycle?
Yeah, it's certainly possible that any judge could delay things. So, that's a reality of this. Delay it past the November 24 election, I think, very, very difficult to do. But, you described this as a long shot that Trump has, that he's going to win the election and therefore pardon himself or drop the prosecution. I agree it's a long shot, but it's a shorter shot than his other alternative, which is to actually try and mount a viable defense in a court of law. So far, we haven't heard any. We've heard a lot of whining about Hillary Clinton and about Joe Biden's garage. But as I said yesterday, those are not legal arguments in a court of law. Arguments in a court of law, Judge Cannon will review what evidence can and the timetable for the trial. To me, I think it's very hard to predict what any particular judge will do, but I think it's important to, I think Jack Smith's decision, the prosecutor, to charge this in Florida shows he's really confident, as he, I think, should be, in the strength of his case, that it doesn't matter who the judge is, who the jury is. We have pretty simple open and shut rules for the handling of classified information and how you deal with authorities when you're asked to return information. And, lying about it and sending your attorneys out to lie about it and asking your attorneys, wouldn't it be better if this all disappeared, all this evidence, and making plucking motions? That turns out not to be legal.
Okay. And then speaking of Jack Smith, Andrew Weissmann, I don't know if you've had a chance to take a look at a piece he co-wrote about the Bedminster theory, about perhaps bringing charges in Bedminster, New Jersey. Is that possible? And why Bedminster, New Jersey?
Yeah, so the indictment talks about two instances in which Donald Trump actually gave classified information to people without security clearances after he was president. One thing to do when you're president, Trump did it in the Oval Office famously with the Russians, gave them really sensitive intelligence information, and probably burned a very important. But that's not illegal when you're president. When you're not president and you're walking around with classified information you're not supposed to have, you certainly can't be disseminating it to others. That's what was alleged to happen. But Jack Smith didn't indict that. And he didn't indict it yet, but it's in his back pocket. So I think Andrew is right to say there's the possibility of a New Jersey indictment. And I wouldn't rule out also the possibility of an indictment for some of this mishandling in Washington, D.C. I do think that if any particular judge were so recalcitrant to try and bring the case to trial, that he would have options to go back to Washington, D.C. and handle it with someone who knows how to deal with classified information. The Washington, D.C. courts are very good at that. They apply the Classified Information Procedures Act routinely, and so they have a lot of experience. And so if this judge is slowing things down too much, they have the possibility to go back to D.C.
Former Acting Solicitor General Neil Katyal, thank you very much for being on this morning.